On the 25th of July 1944, 7 weeks after the invasion of Normandy, the US First Army launched Operation Cobra, the long-awaited Allied offensive to break out from the Normandy beachhead. For 2 days, First Army battled its way forward against a resolute German defence west of St. Lo, and it was on the 27th of July that the army finally forced the enemy line near Marigny and began striking south towards Avranches. By the 31st of July, Coutances, Granville and Avranches had all been liberated, and the American forces were breaking out into Brittany and central France. With the stunning success of Operation Cobra, General Bernard Montgomery, the Commander-in-Chief of the 21st Army Group, and who was in command of all Allied land forces in Normandy, began looking at ways to reinforce First Army's breakthrough, and it was on the 27th of July that he directed the British Second Army to concentrate the bulk of its weight around the town of Caumont and prepare for an immediate offensive towards Flers. It was now essential to ensure that all our efforts went to further the speed and progress of the American drive, and on the 27th of July I was carefully considering the proposed plan of action for the British and Canadian forces in the east of the beachhead. The enemy had very powerful forces in this sector. There were 6 Panzer and SS Panzer divisions on the Second Army front, all of which were east of Noyers Bocage. West of that place, there was no German armour facing the British, and therefore the situation was favourable for delivering a very heavy blow on the right wing of Second Army in the Caumont sector. Under the command of Lieutenant General Miles Dempsey, Second Army's offensive, codenamed Operation Bluecoat, went in on the morning of the 30th of July 1944, when a heavy artillery and air bombardment preceded a ground attack by 1 armoured and 3 infantry divisions. Much like the American experience during the opening days of Cobra, the initial British ground attack was slow due to the close terrain and well-sighted enemy strongpoints. But nevertheless, by the 1st of August, the lead elements of Second Army had penetrated up to 25 kilometres through German lines to the outskirts of Veer, and were converging on the strategic piece of high ground known as Mont Pinçon. With this, Second Army has successfully created a gap between the German Panzer Group West and the German 7th Army, and was now poised to completely outflank those German forces opposing the advance of the US First Army. Facing the possibility of another Allied breakthrough in their lines, the German High Command moved swiftly to counter this new threat, and by the 3rd of August 1944, the 9th SS, 10th SS and 21st Panzer divisions had all been redeployed from the area of Caen to plug the gap at Veer. With their arrival, Second Army's advance began to lose momentum, as it was now forced into fighting for every inch of ground against some of Germany's best troops. Author Robin Nealons explains that the 9 SS Panzer and 10 SS Panzer had been brought over from the east in an attempt to stem the grinding forward progress of Second Army. These German soldiers did not merely hold a position and defy eviction. Their response to any attack was a counter-attack from infantry and armour. This procedure made the British advance expensive. Against such resolute opposition, British progress was inevitably slow. Following the arrival of German armoured forces opposite his army, Lieutenant General Miles Dempsey immediately brought reinforcements forward to strengthen his front line. Among them was the British 3rd Division, which on the 3rd of August was moved up from Army Reserve and into a concentration area just north of Veer. Over the next few days, the 3rd Division was slowly integrated into a section of the line that ran from La Bistère to Prezels, where it was to take over the ground currently occupied by the 11th Armoured Division, which was being shifted east to cover the village of Le Busque. However, it was at around 13:30 on the 6th of August, as this relief was being carried out, that suddenly a heavy concentration of German artillery and mortar fire began to be received, particularly around the hamlet of Pavee, where the men of the 1st Battalion, the Royal Norfolk Regiment of 3rd Division, were in the process of taking over from the 3rd Battalion, the Monmouthshire Regiment of the 11th Armoured. As enemy shells rained down all around them, the officers of both battalions calmly and swiftly rallied their men together and organised a defence of the area to meet the expected German counterattack, which came in just 30 minutes later at around 1400. Spearheading this attack were tanks, infantry and armoured personnel carriers of the 10th SS Panzer Division, whilst in support were a couple of Tiger I tanks belonging to the 102nd SS Heavy Panzer Battalion. Under the cover of tank and machine gun fire, the German infantry crossed over the fields to the south of Pavee and very quickly were able to close up to and begin infiltrating the forward British positions, many of which were still recovering from the opening bombardment. Sighted on the left of the British line was B Company of the 1st Norfolks, which, having suffered heavy casualties from the German artillery, was in no state to put up a strong defence and was soon at risk of being overwhelmed by swarms of German troops. Acknowledging the frailty of B Company's position, one of the company's section commanders, 23-year-old Corporal Sidney Bates, ordered the 9 men under his command to follow him to a new defensive position from which they could better engage the enemy. However, it was from this new point that the corporal observed a group of up to 60 German infantrymen, reinforced by a number of machine gunners, working their way around B Company's right flank, thus threatening to roll up the entire British position at Pavee. Realising this, the corporal quickly swapped his Sten for a nearby Bren gun, and without thought for his own safety, he left his defensive position and proceeded to charge towards the enemy. For the following actions, Corporal Bates would be awarded the Victoria Cross, the citation for which states, "Seeing that the situation was becoming desperate, Corporal Bates then seized the Bren light machine gun and charged the enemy, moving forward through a hail of bullets and splinters and firing the gun from his hip. He was almost immediately wounded by machine gun fire and fell to the ground, but recovered himself quickly, got up and continued advancing towards the enemy, spraying bullets from his gun as he went. His action by now was having an effect on the enemy riflemen and machine gunners, but mortar bombs continued to fall all around him. With little cover around him, Corporal Bates was soon hit for a second time by enemy small arms fire, but nonetheless he refused to give up and continued to march towards the enemy, emptying magazine after magazine as he went, only stopping to reload his weapon. His citation continues. The enemy were now seemingly nonplussed by their inability to check him. His constant firing continued until the enemy started to withdraw before him. At this moment he was hit for the 3rd time by mortar bomb splinters. He again fell to the ground but continued to fire his weapon until his strength failed him. This was not, however, until the enemy had withdrawn and the situation in this locality had been restored. Through the courageous and selfless actions of Corporal Sidney Bates, the situation in B Company's sector was stabilised, and the enemy were driven back in the direction they had come from. However, over on the British right flank, the situation remained in the balance, as the Germans pressed their assault in the hopes of achieving a breakthrough, and over the next 4 hours, heavy fighting developed to the southwest and west of Pavee, until the evening of the 6th of August, when British and American artillery began hitting the German forces with devastating effect. Then, at around 1930, the Sherman tanks of the 2nd, 5th and 4th R Yeomanry of the 11th Armoured Division arrived on the scene as reinforcements, and although they incurred a number of tank casualties when engaging their German counterparts, their arrival shored up the British right flank and eventually compelled the Germans to disengage. By nightfall on the 6th of August, the German counterattack had been defeated. Over the course of the afternoon and evening fighting, both sides suffered heavy casualties. For the Germans, total losses are undetermined but are known to be heavy, with Michael Reynolds in his history of the 10th SS Panzer Division noting that the division began the day with 20 Panzer Mark IVs and Stugs and ended it with half that number. As had happened so many times before, the men of the division were required to go into action on unfamiliar ground and with little or no time for briefing or preparation. On nearly every occasion, and this is the latest example, they were merely given an objective and told to attack it. Indications of enemy strengths were rarely available, the situation on the flanks often unknown, and any idea of attacking other than frontally usually dismissed. For the British, casualties included up to 5 Sherman tanks belonging to the 2nd, 5th and 4th R Yeomanry, whilst the infantry suffered well over 200 men killed and wounded from the 1st Battalion the Royal Norfolk Regiment and the 3rd Battalion the Monmouthshire Regiment. Among these was Corporal Sidney Bates, who at some point on the 6th of August was withdrawn to a nearby British A post to be treated for the wounds he had sustained during his extraordinary charge on the enemy. Sadly though, his wounds proved to be too serious, and despite the best efforts of the British medics to save his life, Corporal Sidney Bates passed away on the 8th of August 1944. Just 3 months later, in November, he was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe so that you never miss one of my future videos.